Yeah, I think there's going to be a period of time where there's going to be some disruption, where the corporations, the different industries, the different institutions, they are trying to figure out how to use AI and how to to leverage the potential of AI, and students will trying to figure out how to learn about that. And certainly there's a period of time where the two things run in parallel, and so there will see some disruption. Certainly we will see some jobs that will change in the near future, but at the same time, a lot of jobs will be created that don't exist today. So, I don't have a sort of a pessimistic approach to this. I actually have an optimistic approach to this. But it will create change. But the same thing happened sort of in the 90s, late 90s, in the beginning of the internet. And when you go back 100 years, I think the average population in the United States that work in agriculture was like something like 60%, and today's significantly smaller than that, but a lot of jobs that exist today didn't exist 100 years ago. So I think something similar will happen here. Certainly the number one, the obvious one, is AI literacy, right? I think that the students should be exposed to AI during their academic journey. I think not doing that is a disservice to the students, because once they graduate, they will need those tools to be successful in the job market. So AI literacy is number one. I think the second one is critical thinking, that the students have to learn to understand and to think like what is true, what is not true, when to use AI, when not to use AI, and to sort of decipher the different messages that are being provided. There's an overflow of information today, so I think critical thinking is incredibly important to really understand what is valuable and what is not valuable. And the third one is growth mindset. This is not something new, but I think it's very important today to be able to have that inner, that strength to differentiate yourself, to have that kind of warrior spirit, to try to be not necessarily better than others, but better than you every day, right? That you want to improve every day a bit better and improve every day better than yesterday. So I think those three skills are very important: critical thinking, AI literacy, and growth mindset. Yeah, I think the first decision they need to make is that they should choose a university that embraces AI as part of the learning process. As I said, going through an academic journey without being exposed to AI today is a disservice to the students. Unfortunately, and I understand why, but unfortunately many universities, they decide to sort of pretend that AI does not exist, and I don't think that's a good approach. I think the good approach is the exact opposite. So the first decision that the students should make is to choose a university that embraces AI and that makes it a part of their academic journey. That question a lot, and I debate that a lot with my provost, the provost of EPUS and the academic team, and I think sometimes people also tend to exaggerate the point, because it's no different than someone, a student in the past, a student could go on Google and sort of copy something and paste, and then how would you know that was created by the student? I think if anything, I could make the argument that now it's more obvious if the student is cheating, because now you have AI to tell that if that was produced by AI, right? And in the past, think about it, go back 40 years, 50 years, it was very hard if you go to a library 50 years ago and then you would literally copy some sentence from a book. The chances that the professor reviewing that would know that exact sentence was part of that exact book, I would say that they were small. With the internet, it was a bit more obvious, because you could sort of like search for whatever you have from the student, but it was still possible that the student goes to some random page and copies the information and pastes the information. So you would have to think that the faculty, the professors, would be validating everything that was really created by the student. Today, it's easier for the student to create content using these technologies, but it's also easier for the faculty to see that technology was created by artificial intelligence. So my recommendation again would be for the universities to embrace the use of AI. I don't think there's anything wrong to use AI to do a paper, to do an assessment, to do some sort of academic work, for as long as you disclose it, right? Because most likely when you find a real job, you will use AI to try to perform at that job. So the university, in essence, should prepare you for the real work and for real life. And real life is that you are in a job market trying to be successful. So I would say that you have to use it, in a ethical way, and the university should determine what ethical means. But again, I would recommend that the students choose a university that has that clarity about what ethical usage of AI means. I don't know. I think it makes sense in many ways. What I think will happen is that the faculty will need to be a lot more creative than what they are today to evaluate what the students know, right? Because as we said, it's easy, you have let's say a multiple choice exam, you put that on ChatGPT and you get this, the answers in 2 seconds. So that's not a good methodology, because how do you know, right? If that the student learned what he or she was supposed to learn. If it's an essay, certainly, you can use ChatGPT, and if you have critical thinking, if you have a good rationale, you can learn a lot, and, using AI could enhance that learning. But it's also true that you can just do it, in 2 seconds and just copy paste whatever was done by AI. So I think that faculty has a tremendous opportunity to rethink how students are evaluated and come up with new ways of doing so that are significantly different than what has been done until now. And certainly project-based learning could be one of them. 100%. I have no doubt. And it's not that I have doubts or not, is that's what the data shows. So there's a lot of noise recently, about higher education having value or no value. And I think that the discussion is very shallow in many ways, because if you look at the data shows that if you have a higher education degree, your chances of producing more revenue through your adult years, they are significantly higher than if you don't. Right. And I take these numbers with a grain of salt, but I think it's almost double the revenue on average that you produce if you have a higher education degree versus if you don't. So the question becomes, how much should it cost? Which I think is really the question that we should be talking about, because I agree that higher education, specifically in the US, is incredibly expensive and not affordable for most people unless they get money from someone else, and then they have that they have to pay for, for sometimes for decades. So I think rethinking the tuition, rethinking the price of higher education is incredibly important. But if you are able to choose a career where you can find a price that is somehow affordable, I think the return on investment is certainly there for the majority of the people, right? It's never that it is the same for everyone, but on average, it does pay off, and I would highly recommend that everyone that can do it. And now with online education, you can still work, create your own company, you can still travel, you can still do all these things, and yet you have access to education and to that degree that will open some doors. I always look at a higher education degree as a key that opens doors. But then once the door is open, it's entirely up to you what you want to do, right? But if you don't have that key, it's very hard to open that door. So I think it's somewhat of a trend, and I do agree that the price of the tuition of higher education is incredibly expensive, and I think that discussion is important, but the value is there. Yeah, I would think that discussion still happens in many countries outside the United States. I would think that in the United States that's no longer a discussion point. My recommendation is always, choose a good university. It's hard to believe that a good university is good on campus, but it's bad online, or vice versa. Either you have quality or you don't have quality. The same with a doctor. You can go visit a doctor, on a face-to-face consultation, or you can have, telemedicine and talk to that same doctor on Zoom or on Teams, and it's the same doctor. He or she has the same knowledge. The fact that you're not inside the same geographical space doesn't make any difference for the knowledge that doctor has. And I think in education is the same. If the university is a good university that is committed to quality, that is committed to student outcomes, that is committed to good service, you will get a good education either online or on campus. Now, I never say that one is better than the other. I think that both have their own merits and their own challenges. I believe that, for younger students, 18, 19, 20, they tend to prefer the on-campus methodology because of of the aspect that that life on campus has. Although I have to say that I read recently that about 20% of that population already prefers to study fully online, and I think that will continue to improve. And many countries around the world, some like Brazil, that number is already 30 to 35%. Because these younger generations, they were born digital, so for them it's only normal to be online. But I understand the life on campus is attractive for a younger adult and how they want to have that experience. So this is sort of like when the internet came about, that people were saying that retail is going to disappear and shopping malls were going to disappear, and they didn't, right? But they had to transform themselves. And today, shops are more like a showroom where you go to see the product, and then you're going to try to go online and find a good deal for that same product. And traditional education will always be there. Online education will continue to expand. But if the university is a good university, the quality is not different between modalities. Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I think about that a lot because I think the concept of networking has changed so much over the last decade, especially the last decade. I remember when I did my MBA that everyone said, oh, the MBA is fantastic for networking. And it was. And I'm still in contact with a lot of my former colleagues from my MBA. However, I think that the intensity of networking that we have today is completely different than what it was 10 or 15 years ago. So my recommendation would be to go above and beyond, the university, but actually to think about how you use the tools you have, especially the social media tools, to build connections that are relevant for your career or for your interests, and not just to be looking at videos of cats or something like that, right? So although that might be fun too, but my point is, I think networking today it's a lot more than the university. And again, I don't want to minimize the aspect of someone that wants to go to on-campus program, and certainly that allows you to network with the colleagues that you have in your class. Although I would also say that's also sort of limited, because if you are in a class with 15, 20 people, okay, that's your network. But okay, you could argue that that's not much. So I would encourage people to use the tools they have today to network, tools like LinkedIn, for example, where you can network with people that share the same interests or that could be professionally relevant for your professional career.